The Reserve Bank will tomorrow make their call on how far the OCR will be cut, because they've obviously signalled it's going to be a 0.5 or 50 basis point cut. That's what the markets have been predicting and pricing in, although there are other business and investment leaders who have said, well, all shouldn't be there. There are others who have said all should cut 0.75. You should go further and give the economy some real stimulus, because we've seen with unemployment numbers, things are flat. Hence why Luxon and co are running around trying to whistle in economic growth. But you need to do more than whistle it in. You need to change settings. Ed McKnight is an economist at Opes Partners. And Ed, good morning. Welcome to the platform, mate.
Duncan, great to speak to you again.
What do you reckon? There's a lot of pressure on him to perhaps go a bit further tomorrow, isn't there? Because we've returned in 2025 and all is not as well as we were hoping.
Well, it certainly isn't as good as you might have hoped. So you've got to remember the last time the Reserve Bank governor moved to the OCR was back in November. That was about 3-ish months ago. And what you've got to kind of look at before you say what's he actually going to do is, well, what has happened since then? What new data have we received? And the two big ones that have come out that could potentially change the Reserve Bank governor's mind are, first of all, the inflation numbers, and then the GDP numbers. Now, if we think about the inflation numbers, they were slightly better than the Reserve Bank was predicting in terms of inflation. We do see that homegrown inflation had fallen a little bit faster than the Reserve Bank had thought, but only very, very small amounts. We're talking about, I think, domestic inflation came in 0.2% under what the Reserve Bank were predicting. And then there's also the GDP numbers. Came out last December, again after the Reserve Bank's last OCR cut. GDP fell 1% in that quarter, which you've got to admit is pretty bad. Now, the question is, are those inflation numbers good enough, and are those GDP numbers bad enough to cause the Reserve Bank governor to cut 0.75% off the OCR? Look, personally, I'm not convinced about that. I think we're going to get a very kind of normal 0.5% cut. It could well be one of the last 0.5% cuts we get for quite some time, because the economy is broadly unfolding as the Reserve Bank is predicting and what they've got in their forecasts. The question I asked myself before I came on and talked to you, Duncan, is, well, what would cause the Reserve Bank to cut 0.75% off the OCR? That would only really happen if Adrian, or the Reserve Bank governor, was trying to surprise the market and cause the economy to spurt forward. Now, bear in mind, yes, those GDP numbers are pretty bad, but the Reserve Bank has one focus. That focus is inflation. Homegrown inflation is still too high. It's running at 4.5%. The reason our overall inflation rate is sitting at 2.2% is because of imported inflation. It's currently negative, about somewhere between negative 1% to negative 1.5%. So it's the fact that the rest of the world has got their inflation under control that is causing us to be at 2.2%, not too far off that midpoint of 1 to 3% that the Reserve Bank is targeting. So I don't think there's enough evidence here or enough really bad data to make the Reserve Bank governor think, right, I've got to deliver a really, really big cut. I've got to shock the market into action to get those interest rates even lower. I think things are broadly unfolding how the Reserve Bank would expect them to, and so that's why I think we're going to get that quite normal 0.5% cut.
I reckon, like a lawyer, you could easily make a case either side if you were paid enough, to go in there and make a case. Because if you look at, I know unemployment doesn't come into it, but unemployment's up, number of job adverts down, housing market flat. There's still plenty of data which suggests that, my goodness, this economy is continuing to be downturning and contracting. And how many of those negative quarters have we had? Was it 8, 7? Something like that?
Too many is the answer there, Duncan. I think it's 6 from memory.
Okay, it's far too many.
The thing that you've got to remember, it's not about is the economy bad or not. That's not going to cause the Reserve Bank governor to change his mind. What's going to make him change his mind is the economy performing substantially worse than I thought it would if I was speaking as the Reserve Bank governor. So the fact that unemployment's at 5.1% is not necessarily the thing that Adrian Orr's going to be thinking about, because I think he's predicting that it's going up to something like 5.2 or 5.3%. What would cause Adrian Orr to be really worried is if unemployment got up above that 5.2 or 5.3% figure that they've currently got within their forecasts. That would surprise them, and that would mean that they have to take some additional action to spur the economy forward.
But you look at the investment intentions of these companies, and they're holding off. They aren't employing. They're laying off, and they're not investing. They're just waiting to see if there's a large cut, I suppose, from the Reserve Bank. They're sort of playing that holding game. Now, holding games are hopeless because there's no investment, and so and there's the 1,000 people going for some jobs. 700-800 people going for one job, and so it's the whole game's changed. It used to be that even though we were in a downturn, we still had our jobs and unemployment was still tight, but that's changed now. And I just wonder if you can make a case for the 0.75, except the domestic inflation, which despite all the pain we've gone through, we've still got high domestic inflation.
Yeah, that's interesting. You always can make an argument either side. If I wanted to make an argument for a 0.75% cut, I'd be pointing to the fact that GDP went down by 1%. But God, over the last year, we have seen our population continue to increase over the last couple of years. I mean, forget the GDP figure itself. You've got to look at GDP per capita, which is really income per capita. So, yeah, our economy, if we stripped out the fact that we've got lots more, we have had lots more people move to New Zealand, you would see that our economy is actually it's kind of being propped up a little bit by immigration because you've got those new families moving into New Zealand, even though you still have quite a number of people moving over to Australia and overseas. And so that influx of population is still holding the GDP numbers up. If you strip out that factor and say, okay, what's happening to per person income or per person GDP, you would see that our living standards have been materially declining over the last about year or two. We've really seen that in there. And so if you wanted to make the case for the 0.75% cut, there's plenty of bad economic data to look at.